What is up, guys? Well, I did not get the seedlings transplanted last Thursday, but it is Sunday and we are outside and we're gonna transplant these. So what we're doing today is I'm going to up pot these cool weather vegetables that I planted, I don't know, a couple weeks ago. And I'm gonna go through my up potting process with you guys and just have a little conversation about seed starting. So the plants that I started were all cold hardy plants except for these guys. This is a jalapeno pepper and it's meant to be like a trailing container pepper. So I started them indoors when I started my cool weather plants just because this guy isn't going outside. So over here I have, this soil is pretty dry here on top, but it's been moist since then. And I didn't have any St. John's wort come up. I didn't have any come up last year either. I've had some bad luck with it, but we're gonna try again. All up and down this row I have calendula. This is yarrow. This is a King Richard leek. This is dill. This is early Jersey Wakefield cabbage. And this is rutabaga. I feel like I planted something in here, but I lost the stick for it with a name and nothing's come up. So I might not have planted it. So first let me go over all the equipment that I use for seed starting. And this is gonna be the same whether I'm starting seeds in the fall, in the spring, or midwinter to transplant out for cool weather crops. And what I have, though I don't want to have these forever, are these pretty cheap 2-inch, I want to say they are, 2-inch cell trays. And they're really flimsy. I've had several of these break. They all came with bases that fit, so you could bottom water. All of those have broken, and all of the top clear domes have also broken. So I only have these left, and I'm continuing to use them because the starting pots that I want are a little pricey, and I'm still getting a use out of these. So this is what I have to start all my seeds in. And then for my base, I have these awesome Bootstrap Farmer 1020 trays. They are super, super sturdy. And I've talked about them on a previous video, but they are great. They are of course going to be pricier than cheap ones you get off of Amazon. But after having so many break over every growing season the past couple years, this is a great investment if you plan on starting seeds regularly. Next up, one thing that I do when I up pot my seedlings, because these aren't ready to go out in the yard yet, they need to get a little bit bigger. So I'm potting them up to a bigger size pot so they can grow a little bit more before I transplant them outside. But I always add just a little bit of fertilizer, and usually I do garden organically. Usually it's going to be worm castings. So you can get worm castings online, and I will link down below where I get them from. It's a reputable company, they're pretty good, and this bag has lasted me a pretty long time. I don't like sprinkle it willy-nilly in the garden. I use it specifically when I transplant plants. I'll put it in the hole, or when I'm up potting I'll give them a little fertilizer just to give them a head start, just to help them grow a little bit more quickly and better before they go out into the yard. And then these are also cheap 5-6-inch pots I got off of Amazon. A lot of these have broken, but I've still got quite a bit of them. If I can find them again, I will. If I can find everything that I have here, I will list it down below this video. But again, like I said, I do want to get the pots that go, the Bootstrap Farmer pots that go with these 1020 trays, eventually when all of my stuff breaks. And then of course I have my little plant markers that always get lost and blow away. I think I also got these on Amazon. So, always label your plants. Now the soil that I'm using today, I have talked about in several videos, and it is the Fox Farm Ocean Forest potting soil. It's an excellent potting soil. I use it only to start seeds because it's, I think now at this point, it's over $30 a bag. So it's a little pricey, but it is excellent quality. It's organic, it has natural fertilizers in it. So it gives your seedlings a really good start. And like I said, I buy maybe 1 bag a season, and that gets me through all of my potting that I do for transplant into the garden, but I do not use it in my raised bed garden because that would be so expensive. So expensive. So if you've started seeds indoors or outdoors in a greenhouse, wherever you've started seeds that isn't in the garden, why would you want to up pot? 2 main reasons why you would want to up pot. Number 1, your plants are getting too big in their little pots they're currently in, and they're in danger of getting root bound long before you need to transplant them outside. So one of these examples is if you start maybe your tomato plants too early and the frost comes late, and we're now 8 weeks in and your tomato plants are 2 feet tall in these tiny little pots. They will live and you can absolutely transplant them out, but they may suffer a little bit. Their growth may be stunted because if they get super root bound, they aren't getting the nutrients and the water that they need. They aren't being able to spread out and grow. So that is one reason why you'd want to up pot if you can't put them where they're supposed to go just yet. Give them a little bit more room to grow for the time that you still have them inside. And that kind of leads into my second reason. Technically, these seedlings are, if there were 1 seedling per seed cell, they would be just fine to keep growing a little longer. But I do use the multi-sow method. So there are several plants in each of these cells, which means there are multiple root systems that are fighting for water and nutrients. And if they're not able to get out into their own soil and spread their roots, they will get stunted in the long run and just not do as well if you had just potted them up and put them in individual containers with the proper amount of soil and nutrients that they need. So why do I put so many seeds in 1 cell if I have to do all of this work later? Let me tell you, I use the multi-sowing method, which I believe was termed, or the term was coined by Charles Dowding. But for plants that don't mind their roots being disturbed, tomatoes, peppers, lots of plants don't mind it. You can easily separate these seedlings gently, but you can separate them out and plant them in individual pots without them taking too much of a beating. There are plants you don't want to do this multi-sow method with though, like squashes, cucumbers, gourds, beans, and peas as well, though I've had luck transplanting peas. They are very sensitive to root disturbance, so you don't really want to transplant them at all if you can avoid it, but you definitely don't want to use this method because the roots can take a lot of damage when you're breaking these plants apart when using the multi-sowing method. If I were, growing squash and beans in these seedling trays right now, I would just have 1 plant per cell. And if I had more than 1 come up, I would snip it and thin the seedlings that way instead of trying to save all of them. So let me get this started while I talk to you guys, but I'm gonna have to move you because you're on the table and it shakes. So I do have another video where I up potted some amaranth and quinoa, I believe, and I will link that above if you guys don't get enough information from this video. I'm gonna be talking a lot, but I will show the process as well. So why do I start my seeds indoors? Several reasons, several good reasons to start your seeds indoors. First off, it gives you a head start on the entire gardening season. If I have the ability to get 8 extra weeks ahead on my tomato plants, then I will absolutely do that so I can get tomatoes 8 weeks earlier. Of course, starting seeds indoors isn't available for everyone, and I'm going to show you guys my seed starting setup after this. But if you have the means, or even if you just have 1 little shelf with 1 light and there's a couple plants that you can start, I absolutely recommend it. Because not only does it give you a head start on the season, it can also really benefit you if you deal with maybe extreme temperature fluctuations or just undesirable weather like I do. For those of you that are new here, I live in Southwest New Mexico, USA, and I live in the high desert, and the Chihuahuan desert specifically. So it gets very hot during the summers very, very quickly. But I also have freezing nights. I think I've frozen almost every night, at least here on my property, close to the beginning of January. January and February are coldest months anyways. But that really makes it difficult to be able to start seeds outside in a greenhouse if I had one, just because there's only so much work a greenhouse can do depending on how low the temperature drops at night. And so if I were to direct seed all of these plants right at the beginning of spring, after I've had my last frost, it would get very hot very quickly, and the seedlings in their small juvenile, just trying to get a head start on life stage, would be baking in 90-degree heat in April. And you know, I pick plants that do well in the heat on purpose, but it doesn't hurt to help them out a bit. And if they're already at a larger stage of growth when you transplant them out in the garden, they are more likely to survive. Third reason to start seeds indoors is if you have really bad pest damage right at the beginning of your gardening season. So the main pests I deal with at the beginning of a gardening season are going to be roly-polies and grasshoppers. And what they tend to do if I plant seeds out, direct seed in the garden, is they will just come along and completely eat my seedling after it's sprouted out of the ground, which can be really, really frustrating, especially if like you don't even know what happened, so you think that the seedling never came up. But if you, obviously once these plants get a little bigger, they can handle a bit of pest damage without, you know, getting their whole head lopped off. But that's another reason why I like to start my seeds indoors. And there are tons of benefits, and there are tons of benefits to direct seeding, like direct seeding your root sensitive crops like cucumbers and beans and peas. That can be, depending on the case, more beneficial than trying to start them indoors, depending on how they do. Now, for all of my followers in a desert climate, if you have had terrible luck sowing seeds outdoors because the top inch of soil is always dry, then starting indoors is a better option. With my soil, if I try to direct seed sometime in April and it is getting into the 90s during the day in April, I cannot keep that soil moist enough to get seeds to germinate unless I'm out there every hour spraying it down. So, and some seeds like dill or a lot of herbs need to be sown on the surface of the soil because they may need light to hit them to germinate. In that case, there's no moisture happening there. It's just not going to happen. So particularly for those kinds of plants that need to be surface sown, I have to start them indoors, most likely under a humidity dome as well. Now, if all those issues sound like your issues, I don't want you to get discouraged if you don't have all this stuff. I have cultivated this smattering of garden tools over several years. You can very easily sow seeds in, you know, an old milk gallon jug. Just cut it through the middle, and then you have both a top for a humidity dome and the bottom for the plants. You can use plastic cups like red Solo cups. You can use bins like this to start your seeds. You can use anything really. You don't need fancy trays or such. I do recommend getting decent soil though. The point is to just grow something. All right, let me show you guys what I'm doing. We're gonna take a different camera angle here. So for each of these calendulas, I did my best to separate them out into singles. But sometimes when you plant a lot in one spot, their roots can get kind of jumbled up. And I don't need this many calendula plants, so I don't mind throwing a couple together that I couldn't really break apart and just doing like a Hunger Games with it, where whoever grows faster, bigger, gets to live and the other one gets snipped off. So I'm not breaking my back trying to save like exactly as many calendula plants as I planted. I just want to be able to use a small amount of soil to generate a larger number of plants. So I've got all the calendula done, and now I'm gonna move on to the yarrow. And I don't think I'm gonna break this apart, so we just kind of push the back out and gently pull the top. These guys are really small seedlings. But with yarrow, it's actually kind of a clumping and bunching perennial. So you can just rip this in half and plant these two bunches together, which I'm not going to do. I already have yarrow in my garden. I do not need that many more plants. So I'm just gonna plant this guy whole as he is in a bigger pot. So what we're gonna do is put some of this in the bottom, just so he can comfortably sit right on top there, but not forget to put in a little bit of worm castings. I'm gonna stick this boy right here and just essentially fill him in on the sides. Yarrow is pretty difficult because it's really low growing at the beginning, but it'll be okay. There we go. Now he's in a bigger pot. It's got a lot of room to grow. So let me illustrate this with one of the rutabagas, because they're a little bit bigger to see. So we're gonna squeeze the back here and gently, gently pull on all of these guys. Ooh. This one's a little root bound. See all that going around? So I probably waited a little too long on these guys, but most of them will survive this, I promise. I'm just gonna gently shake the rest of this soil off that I can so I could see the roots a little bit better. And as you start to shake, you're not trying to tug these plants apart like this, because you'll just rip them off at the heads and leave the roots. But if you gently work the roots and get all that soil out, they'll start to come apart, hopefully for the most part intact. And here you go. And here's one little rutabaga that's gonna go in its own pot. Now with these single ones that are a bit easier to hold and see, I just hold it up about where I want the greens to sit in the pot, and then I fill around it. That ensures that all of the roots are pointing downward and are going to expand downward into the pot. There we have him. Now the difficulty of separating the roots well changes whether the soil is wet or dry, and how root bound the seedlings are when you pull them out. These ones are a bit large, and I probably should have done this when I said I was gonna do it a couple days ago, but they're still okay. But honestly, the biggest thing is just not letting the seedlings get too big before you do this. But definitely try it, experiment yourself, and you know, even if they don't survive transplant and you just get 2 out of 5, it's still better than 1. So this is an example of when the soil is too wet and you try to separate out these roots. So I just dipped this whole thing in a thing of water, and now I can't shake any of this soil out, and all of these roots are just stuck together. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to separate them easily. Ah. Okay, that's okay, and that's where we're gonna leave it. I have 3 in this one and 2 in here. And I don't mind that. I'll get 2 plants out of there. Actually, I think I can do this one again because they separated into 2 sides. So I've got, okay. That might work. We'll try 3. But I tend to have an easier time when the soil is drier, and just not use a potting soil with a ton of vermiculite or perlite. It's up to you. Experiment, try it yourself. Definitely give it a shot because this is a super awesome method to save on soil and get a lot of little plants out of it. Plus, you don't have to go through the whole, which seedling am I gonna kill when you're thinning your plants? It's always the worst time trying to decide which one you want to kill. You want them all to live. This way you can. All right, guys, let me finish this up and then we will go inside and I will show you my seed starting setup. Alright guys, well we finished just in time because the wind's starting to pick up, as usual. Here are all my seedlings. Now I didn't need to label them because at this stage in their growth I know which ones are which. So I didn't waste any labels on these guys, but everyone has been transplanted. So I'm going to water these guys in and take them inside, put them on the grow shelf, and we will go over my whole grow shelf setup. Alright guys, so we are in the grow room slash Vivian's bedroom. And here are all the seedlings we just potted. These are plants that I have going for the hydroponics tower when I get spaces left. These are the potted herbs and lettuces that I had over the winter experiment. And I just stuffed these into here afterwards. So all of my lights I got on Amazon. These are different. These are single lights and they're actually kind of an amber color, but they are 5000K daylight lights, as well as these. Or so the company says on Amazon. Frankly, they all work and they're all pretty cheap. I want to say I got 2 of these guys and they are 2-stranded for about 30 bucks. In fact, here's the box for the yellow lights. And it came with several lights as well as these like sidewalls to decrease the brightness from the side. You can see those there. And several snaps. I have a video where I put one of these light sets together, this exact one in this box, and I'll link that right here. It's a hydroponics video. But that is it, and here my plants will stay until it's time for them to go outside. Now, one good thing about this is a south-facing window. So I don't really need a heat mat under here for all of my summer plants like peppers. They really germinate well in heat because of the sun that comes through this window and basically lights up and warms this whole grow shelf. Now, when I bought these, I did not think of getting the widest one possible, and they don't exactly fit a 10-20 tray this way, but if I turn it the other way, then I can only fit like 1 or 2 on here, and I have a lot of plants, so they make do just fine. You don't need super expensive lights. These are just daylight 5K shop lights. That's all, and they work great. See? Great. Awesome. Thank you guys for joining me today. I will catch you on the next one.